Everybody, and welcome to our brand new series of Mindset Monday. So, we're TKD Coach Academy. I'm Richie Ford and I'm with Adrian Byrne. So, we're covering a lot of content on ITF Taekwondo as it relates to training, competition, and all things around that. So, today's particular series is about the mental aspect of performing and in terms of like gradings, competition, etc. So we're going to basically answer questions that we receive that people have on this topic, and we're going to try our best to answer them and come up with some solutions for people to help them to improve the mental side of their martial arts training and performance. So the mental side of training is something that everybody experiences, and it can often be a difficult challenge that we have to deal with. So things like nerves, anxiety, low self-belief, etc. So when we're trying to perform at our best, sometimes these problems can get in the way. So I think it's something that we could do a better job of sharing knowledge with, and to get people a little bit more involved when and almost like improve this side of their training. So that's the objective with this series. So today is the first episode of that. If you are more interested in the sparring side of things, we also have Fight Chat Friday, which we release each Friday. But as we said, every Monday we're going to release this series, Mindset Monday, and you can send in your questions to us on Instagram. So every Monday we'll put up the question feature where you can send in your questions, and hopefully we'll get to some of them to answer them. If some of them relate to each other, maybe we can broaden them into one topic. But hopefully everybody will be able to pick up some things that they will find useful in terms of the mental side of martial arts. So Adrian, will you just go through some of the questions we have for today?
Yeah, definitely. So thank you again to everyone who sent in questions, because it'll really help us to kind of get this underway. So the first thing was, how can we help out capable students who self-sabotage, thinking that they can't do it? Secondly, we had prepared totally, but before the main activities or before the main event comes, I get nervous. Why is that? A third one, how to deal with adrenaline or nerves. So again, it's a little bit like the second one, but we'll try and take a slightly different angle on both. And then finally, how to get over the mental block of sparring someone you spar regularly. Okay, so we can definitely dive into those and have a little bit of an exploration into them. So starting out with, how can we help out capable students who self-sabotage, thinking they can't do it?
So for me, this is kind of like hitting on the idea of like self-belief a little bit,
Yeah.
and also touching on the idea of being able to control what's in your control. So first of all, I just want to hit on the idea of self-sabotage. A lot of the time, this comes from a little bit of overthinking. So that can happen in the moment, but before we even get to that, the self-sabotage will probably come from low confidence and low self-esteem. So for me, somebody in this situation, I would be looking to almost prove to them in terms of the raw evidence of their abilities, and basically how they can um, get in there and mix with the best, or mix with whatever level that they're hoping to aspire to.
Yeah.
But I think this idea of evidence is very, very important, and it's something that we all relate to. So I think that that's a very important thing. Now, what are some of the ways that you can show evidence? So basically, as a coach, try to catch them doing good. So what are some of the things that you see that will be a good quality or a good trait, and try to affirm that on occasion. So you don't want to just hit it once and just leave it there. The more often you catch them doing good, and you can kind of almost get the repetition of this, it will start to build evidence for your students and for people that you're working with, where they'll start to say, okay, maybe I do have this skill, maybe I do have this, and it will more become evident to them then. And then that evidence and confidence will start to build as a result.
Yeah. So, I mean, building on that, competence leads to confidence, so as you said, you need the evidence of it though, to kind of to show a person that they really are competent, and it doesn't have to be right across the board in every skill set or in everything that they do. Another thing to get across to people is sometimes that you don't need to be good at everything in order to be successful. That having a winning formula is a combination of things that is all about making the very best use of the skills and the talents that you possess, and leveraging your advantages over your opponent and finding their disadvantages and manipulating those. That, that success in and of itself is not guaranteed to anyone, and nobody has a monopoly over it or a right to it. It's something that we can interact with. So from the point of view of, if you are holding yourself back, through a self-belief or through a lack of confidence, and it's not letting you achieve your potential, well, then what we really do need to be doing, as you're saying, is increasing that self-belief and self-confidence in the controllable way. So can we be in control of our effort? Can we be in control of, as it's staying in the moment, so that we're not overthinking and, giving another person a pedestal to stand on that, they may have done nothing to earn. And then it's also, I think, around setting realistic goals and targets where, it's perfectly reasonable for a person to self-sabotage if they have no, we say, right to the belief that they should be able to stand in a ring with somebody. So say, for example, it's your very first visit to the World Championships and you're up against the current world champion and you have no track record that proves that you're ready to be there. It's very hard to develop a confidence that goes with that situation, and that's justifiable. But if we have a very reasonable degree of of a goal that's set, and we are confident we can achieve that goal, well, that'll be perfect. That'll be enough. Because what we really are trying to do is to show that within the particular environment or context that we're looking at right now, you have a right to believe you can be successful. And the evidence shows us that you have a right to believe you can be successful.
And like the opposite of this really is doubt, isn't it? So like as you said, what do? You outwork doubt, and you get opportunities for yourself to expose yourself to challenges, to be able to bring your level up a little bit, and to get that evidence that you are capable of whatever it is that you're looking to achieve. And that can be quite difficult, and a lot of time it just takes that first step of being courageous. You know what I mean? You need to take that first step of putting yourself in a challenging situation, and that does take courage.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are just have that fear of stepping out of their comfort zone, and that could be also a problem with this as well.
Yeah, and I suppose for me, my last point on that is to recognize that there's an element of control involved in that, and do you see yourself as being in control of things that impact the outcome? And if you see everything as predetermined, well, you're not in a position where it's going to get better for you. Where if your mindset is that it's not something you can change, well, then it is going to be very, very difficult. And so we have to work on developing a growth mindset first, to moving to the point where you see and understand that your actions impact outcomes. And when you believe that your actions impact outcomes, well, you can actually determine your actions. You can decide what actions to take and gain the confidence that comes from that. By being and seeing the evidence of your competence again and again and again, you can then move forward from there. And I think that's really the first place that you start. You build confidence based on being capable and competent, in whatever the basic skill is.
And just on that, on the controllables as well, what can you control but your work ethic and your attitude, really? And once you just give it all on those two fronts,
Yeah.
then like whatever happens. Don't be so afraid about the outcomes and the results. Like they will naturally come once you're doing the right things and exposing yourself in the right environment, ticking the correct boxes, trying your best in terms of work rate, and always trying to have a positive attitude. I think that's a great place to start. And then like you're more of what's called in sports psychology of a challenge state. And that's a vital aspect to be able to put yourself in. And then you don't have to worry about the outcomes in terms of the results and worrying about failure and things like that. So I think just putting yourself in the right position to putting yourself in the correct position to get off on the right foot, I think is a great place to start.
Yeah. So maybe we look into that second question then, and we're talking about, I feel totally prepared, but before the main event comes or before the main activities come, I get nervous. Why is that? Okay, and I think that's got to be such a common thing for people to have experienced.
And that's the first thing. It's the same for everybody. Everybody naturally will experience nerves. It's something that's natural for all of us. It's ingrained in us. So like basically our bodies are primed to deal with nerves when we are in like almost like a threatening environment. So like years and years ago, this was obviously designed for you're going to be eaten by a lion or something like that back in prehistoric times almost, but that's still the genes that we have within us as humans.
Yeah.
So anytime that we're exposed to something that kind of takes us out of our comfort zone, our body reacts and we get nervous. But what is actually happening is that our body is producing certain like almost, you got nerves, you got anxiety, things like that, and they're for us to be protected. So your body's saying, hey, hold up here, this probably isn't the best idea, and it's just your body's way of reacting, but also it's your body's way of preparing you to deal with something that's coming forward. So the basically you just got to learn how to control the nerves without leaving them overwhelm you, and that's the most important thing. But do know that everybody experiences them.
I think, yeah, that knowledge that it's something that everyone else has experienced is an important thing, but also understanding what it is, and that it's reinterpreting the signals. So that nervousness is also a sign that your body is priming itself for the best performance of its life. So you are being tuned up to 11. That's the, someone hitting that NOS button,
Yeah.
we are ready to go here. And that's, all of the things that you experience, the sweaty palms, the dry mouth, the urge to vomit or go to the toilet, the agitation, the fidgeting, the pacing, the distractedness, all the different things that come about in that state. They're not all positive all of the time, but they are all a signal that your body is getting ready to do some seriously top-notch stuff. And that when you start to understand that this is my body's way of telling me this is go time, I'm ready, I'm going to be there for you, this is good, and we look at it a different way. And what I try to tell, go through with my students as well is, okay, in what way is that different from being excited? And when you're excited for something, you can have that distractedness, that, displacement of time, you can have those sweaty palms, the fidgetiness, you can have all of those things going, even the rush into the bathroom, whatever it happens to be. And it's really about your interpretation of the underlying cause of it. Like, if you think it's something you should be afraid of, you perceive that as anxiety, or, you perceive that with anxiety. Whereas if you think it's something that's going to be good in the end, it's excitement. And I think that's what a lot of competitors manage to do over time. They shift their perception by associating positive things that have come following that state with the precursor. So like Pavlov with his dogs, and he rings the bell and the dogs start to salivate. We need to kind of almost train ourselves that when we get these signals, good things are about to happen. And then we look at making it manageable, because you mentioned anxiety, and yeah, this can go over an edge. We can be under aroused or over aroused, and if we're over aroused to the point where we're anxious, that's not constructive. That's not helping us anymore. That's, putting very negative things in place that we can't go past. And that's where we might use, a 5 breath technique or a progressive muscular relaxation, pre-performance routine, or, our structured warm-up to help us get into the zone, as we call it, to get into the right place where I'm feeling that buzz. I have that, that the nerves are fluttering, that's all there, but I'm in the right zone for it and I feel good about that. The opposite end of it is some people will get nervous, but what happens is it throws them down like into a very almost lethargic state where they're yawning, they're not really up for it, there's something missing. And again, we'll solve a lot of that the same way. So rather than calming ourselves with breathing exercises or progressive muscular relaxations, we might hit a bit. We get on the pads, we go through our warm-up routine, we raise the intensity a little bit, and we find ourselves in that nice balance where the nerves or that side of it is noticeable but tolerable. There's a fine point, and you got to find where the right place is for you. You look at people at the side of the ring, some are absolute hype and they feel good that way, but that's not great if you're going out to do a pattern. So you have to find the right level that's good for you and good for the activity.
Yeah, that's it. Definitely, you need to be able to find what, and it's almost kind of like a trial and error thing as well, where you gotta go to the small tournaments, see what works for you, see what doesn't work for you, because as you said, what works for somebody won't work for you in terms of your personality, in terms of maybe your style of sparring as well. Are you somebody who's kind of like really high tempo? Are you somebody who's, if that's the case, you're a really high tempo person, then it doesn't make sense for you to be completely relaxed as you go in the ring. And
Yeah.
vice versa. If you're somebody who's like nice and calm and fluid, it doesn't make a lot of sense for you to be like crazy intense before you go in there. So it does depend on you personally. So finding that is very important. And I would suggest trying to go to as many tournaments, go to gradings, things like that, where you can possibly and be able to expose yourself to find that right balance and find that correct recipe for you.
Yeah. And I think that leads us into our next question on how to deal with adrenaline and nerves. So we've kind of touched on that a little bit, but maybe we need to jump back into one or two of the specifics. So if
Yeah.
if you're we're dealing with where it can drive you two ways. It can you could be in an optimal state of peaked and you're ready to go, and then if it goes too far, you get anxious, and that's where you find people puking in a bin beside the hall, or they're almost afraid to go too far from the bathroom. They're running there, or they get that almost looking around. You see the eyes scanning the crowd. They're looking for things, and you can see, right, okay, this isn't a good place to be.
Just overwhelmed,
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean,
Yeah.
I think you need to experience that to truly appreciate what that feels like. But when you get there, and I can only imagine this is what it's like, for someone who's afraid of heights, and I'm taking them on this super fun roller coaster, and they're looking at me going, like,
Yeah.
this isn't good. And in the end, that's where you need a coping strategy. And the coping strategy has to be in place and has to be practiced before you get to the competition. It's not something that you want to be trying to do when you get there. So what can you do to bring you to that position, to some level of arousal or anxiety before you actually go to competition? And how can we create that in training? And very often we'll do it with physical stimulus and training. We'll present you with a challenge that's going to be physically exhausting or physically very challenging or whatever it is, and that's something that we can do. Certainly for patterns, you can make it feel much more like the event. You can put pressure on, put judges in front of people, put the camera in front of them. You can do things like that to make it a little bit more challenging. And then you practice your breathing, your relaxation. Then you practice your progressive muscular relaxation. So and there's routines you can follow with that. That's when you decide, right, put the headset on, listen to the right music, and go through your routine. And I think one of the best things that you can do in terms of nerves and anxiety is have a routine that you do before that performance. How long do I need? Who do I need with me? What are we going to do? Do people talk to me? Not talk to me? Am I to be left alone? And you set all of that routine in place so that you arrive at more or less the same state at ringside, ready to perform, and you're not vulnerable to the swings of the ups and downs of nerves and anxiety.
And on that idea of the swings of ups and downs, it's basically being able to stay away from the both extremes, isn't it? So you don't want to be completely overwhelmed with like anxious feelings, and then on the other side, you don't want to be completely like just chilled out to the max either. So it's just staying away from those extremes and trying to just bring it back to neutral as best as possible. And being aware that, of course, that this is natural and it is to be expected. So, as you said with the routine, it's very important as well that one thing that does bring a benefit of is it helps you to be a bit more present. And that's something that's very, very important for people, especially people who are just kind of dealing with these problems at the start. Your body begins to overthink, your breath starts to increase, your heart rate. So just being able to be a little bit more present in the moment and just relax a little bit, because that's where we see 90% of people go on that extreme where they just get too nervous, they get overwhelmed. And so most people will drift to that extreme. So it's just being able to bring it back, become a little bit more present. And I think the routine is very valuable for that, because it just puts you in that moment where all you're thinking about is there and then. It's like when you go to the cinema, like you're not really thinking about the outside world. When you go to training, you're not really thinking about the outside world. It's you're there and you're in that moment. And that's what you want to replicate, that feeling as best as possible, if you want to just pull away from the extreme of anxiety and just overwhelm.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's generally very good advice. And there's plenty of resources people can seek out online in terms of the things like the relaxation techniques and the breathing techniques. But I think having the routine, and it's something that we find every year when we go to national team and we ask someone to warm up. We just, as a simple test, you're like, okay, everyone, you have 15 minutes to warm up, be ready to spar in 15 minutes. And you look at what people do. And very often they sit in a circle and stretch, or they go away into a corner and bounce, or they do something. But they don't, almost universally, except for the most experienced people, they don't actually arrive ready to spar after 15 minutes because they've never actually practiced, for newer people, they've never practiced warming up on their own. They just do what the class is doing.
Yeah.
And so, that, as you said, like it's huge to build your own routine, to be confident in your own routine, to not be watching what everyone else in the room or the warm-up area is doing. And I think for anyone who's gone to an international championships, like that warm-up area is like, oh, that
It's
is
intense.
a bundle of bad energy sometimes,
Yeah, it lets you know you're alive anyway, because the
Yeah.
experience, kind of like just the feels you get off it is just incredible.
Yeah. And so dealing with that, you need to have your routine. And I think that's fundamentally that's step one. Come back to us when that routine's in place, and then we'll see where we go from there, I think. So the
And
last
again,
question.
that requires a
Sorry.
bit of tweaking as well, doesn't it?
The routine certainly does. Yeah. I mean, the
Yeah.
routine for me is one of those things that, you'll do it and you'll set it. And then if it doesn't feel right at the end of it, you need to go again. And often
And
it's
that's
a case
fine
of,
too.
yeah. And sometimes it's just you haven't the right person with you. You don't have the right warm-up partner. You haven't got the right coach with you, or whatever it happens to be. And sometimes realizing as a coach, you're not the person who needs to be there in this moment in time is okay. That can be a challenge too. So a person needs what a person needs when it comes to their game day prep. And, you can't really argue with it. It's, well, what do you need to get ready? Well, that's what you're going to do, So our final question for today was, how do you get over the mental block of sparring someone you spar regularly? And I love this question.
Yeah, so we kind of touched a lot of this already in terms of the grand scheme of topics, but it's getting back to that controllable state of you can control your work ethic in the ring, and you can control your preparation in terms of your routine and your warm up, and you can control your mindset. So it's up to you how you react to a given situation. Are you going to react to it negatively? Are you going to react to it positively? And that's in your control. You can't control the result. You can't control your opponent. You can't control the referee. So just being able to differentiate that first off the bat is extremely important. And once you've ticked that box and you understand what you can control and just focus on those tasks, then you can also look at the whole idea of kind of like the threat and challenge state again. So like based on this question, it seems to me like this person is kind of going in with it under threat. Where if you need to just expand how you perceive this, it's a challenge. It's another opportunity for me to put my game on this person and try to get to win. It's my opportunity to do X, Y, or Z. It's not a threat where, oh, here I go into the slaughter again for this person, whatever. So it's how you perceive it, and your frame and your state when you're going into it is massively important.
And I think that's, as you said, the frame is really the critical thing here, because, if you're only sparring at a level where you usually win, you're probably not surrounding yourself with the right group of people to improve. So when you go into a bigger environment, maybe you have to step out of your club, or maybe it's only when you go to certain tournaments or national events or whatever it happens to be, you should be finding people who you are probably not going to beat. And you need to be, as you said, when you look at that as a challenge state, it's like, okay, how do I frame this game around the idea of I'm going to improve somehow by engaging in this? I'm going to take this as an opportunity to learn something, to challenge myself to do something better, to take opportunities to seek out particular scores, to mentally improve some element of my performance or how I react to certain situations within this match. And then when you set your pre-game goals within that frame of reference, you can now achieve something that's meaningful to you, and then that match meant something. And I think the problem is when you go in with an outcome goal that is, well, no one's going to set an outcome goal of going in and losing the match. So when your outcome goal is that the match is good or not good, depending on whether I won or lost, you are actually setting yourself up to lose and to further reinforce a negative mental state around that particular match. Whereas when you go into that match, we look at how we look at team sparring. Sometimes you go into team spar and the goal is take one flag off that other person. And you can come out and celebrate with your team if you took that flag away and you achieved the team objective. So the objective for us as lifelong learners is, how do we continuously improve? How do we get better all the time? Because if I can get better out of every match I go into, eventually the match becomes winnable, or more matches elsewhere become winnable as well. So how do I change that mental state to where I have an achievable goal from that match that's going to improve me as a competitor overall. And that's got to be the only goal each and every time you do it, I think.
Like in a way, the opponent is irrelevant. It should
Yeah.
be, as we said, controllable earlier. So what is, as you said, the controllable objective that you can complete? And that's so important. So like
Mm.
whether it's just like putting that person under pressure, you can control that. Whether it's that, but it's not about getting the win or getting the loss. It's what can you do that puts yourself in a good position to succeed.
Hmm.
But what is that thing that is controllable? And that's important. And once you just focus on that, it puts you in just a different frame of mind, and you just attack it from a different perspective, and that can be so valuable. So just focus on maybe one or two things that you can do that you have complete control over, that you can do that puts you in a good position to succeed. And that's just a great way to start off.
I should add one thing as well that's really, really important. And I think I as a coach, was almost taking for granted in this, which is that um, when you meet the person that, you spar the whole time and you maybe have negative outcomes against, from time to time, like I took into the consideration in the question that it was a clubmate, and I'm presuming it's someone in your club. And, if that person is not helping you learn, they're a cancer in your club and you've got to deal with that. Like, that's the first thing. It's like, if your teammate is not there to help you improve, they're a problem. That whole relationship needs to be sorted first, and maybe going through a coach. I think that's really important, because what we get is, like, we're an individual sport in Taekwondo, but we're also, we don't improve or develop in isolation. So if my teammates are not helping me get better, and if I'm not of value to my teammates by helping them to get better, there's no point in us being in a team or in a club together. So the goal has to be, I'm sparring you. I have some negative connotations around it. I'm not expecting a positive result, whatever. But I have to have a strong enough relationship to where I can say, look, here's what I'm trying to improve today. This is how you're going to push me today. And then vice versa. We would see this as coaches the whole time. What happens when you have a top dog, you have an alpha dog or an alpha female in the room who you cannot find a partner to match? And that's my club through and through. I've never had more than a couple of alphas around at a time, where most of the time the next alpha is being developed at that point in time, and they're not ready for them yet. So how do I constantly keep challenging this alpha competitor the whole time? And that's where you have to be working on setting constraints. If it's just a fight, well, the alpha wins. The alpha gets the meat. That's how it goes. And there's nothing learned, except that the alpha is still the alpha and everyone else is still, underneath them in the pack. And that's no good as a learning environment, because what we need to do, to nurture and create in our clubs is a learning environment where everyone gets better all the time. The alpha has to be given situations where they are going to be they're going to be challenged. And if they have to have limitations put on them, if the fight has to be constrained, then so be it. And then vice versa, if someone is not of that level, well, then the person has to understand that, look, if this person is to improve and become a useful training partner to me, I have to help them to, improve, and and I have to challenge them to improve. And I think that's really important too. So as much as we focus on working on your own mindset and what you can do within, that situation, that's with the concept of a competition, of a tournament where the other person is trying to win. And that's something that you will really need to do. But within the context of the club, you have two vehicles on this. You can explore this with your training partner, with your coach. So I think it's something that you can really do if you have the right kind of training partners and the right kind of coach. You can do an awful lot to improve your outcomes. And it might just be that the threat level is too high, that you're so far out of your comfort zone for learning, it's not good anymore. I mean, we have to bring the comfort zone back down just a little bit so that you're in a challenge state rather than in a threat state, as Richie spoke about earlier.
Definitely. Fantastic. Yeah. A lot of good takeaways there. And I hope that people take some value from this. So if it's something that you enjoy, please let us know by hitting that like button. It really does wonders, and it lets us know if this is something that people are interested in. If you are interested in learning a little bit more about constraints and this type of training, particularly for coaches, go check out our video from last Friday on Fight Chat Friday. So that is now live on our YouTube channel as well. And if you want to get involved in next week's episode, make sure and drop our questions in. So on Monday today, We're going to have it on our Instagram feed, TKD Coach Academy. So get on over there right now and drop your questions into us on our Instagram story. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.